Grace and peace to you in the name of God, the Creator, Christ the Redeemer, and the Spirit who sustains us. Amen. What do you think you would do if you were hanging out with your friends one day and one of them tends to be a little strange, a little odd, but really deeply faithful in an unusual way these days, and also usually right about things? What if your one strange friend said, "Hey, look, there's Jesus"? Would you believe your friend, or would you laugh it off? But then what if they were right? What would you do? Would you go see? And then what if Jesus said to you, "What are you looking for?" What would you say? After the prologue, that great hymn to creation and to Jesus' birth, the Gospel of John really gets down to telling the story of Jesus in verse 19. But the first couple of days are all about John, the one who was sent to be the witness to testify to Jesus' divinity. As we heard last week, he's questioned by representatives of the Pharisees, and on 2 successive days, he proclaims the coming of the Messiah. Our text starts on the 3rd day of John's Gospel, when John is again on the banks of the Jordan, but this time he actually sees Jesus. He points at him and he says, "There he is. That's who I was talking about." He proclaims Jesus' identity as the Messiah. And maybe because he was willing to stand up to his questioners, or maybe because he keeps saying he's here to proclaim Jesus' arrival, or maybe because he is just so believable, 2 of his disciples immediately leave him to go to Jesus. And John's work here is done. He's announced Jesus. He has brought Jesus front and center onto the stage and even supplied his first 2 disciples. Now he fades into the background. This is not his story. And now it's not even his story to tell. But Jesus notices the disciples following him and he asks them, "What are you looking for?" There are a lot of ways that they could have answered this question. They could have been bold and said, "John said you're the Messiah and we believe him," or "We want to know if it's true." Or they could have chickened out and said, "We think we dropped our keys and they might have been along this road somewhere. Have you seen them?" But instead they answered Jesus' question with one of their own. It seems like a non-answer, even a non sequitur. But for the author of John's Gospel, it is not. This is the first time Jesus will ask someone what they're looking for in John's Gospel, but it won't be the last. When the soldiers come to arrest him, he will ask them, "Whom are you looking for?" And when he meets Mary of Magdala in the Garden of Gethsemane after his resurrection, he will ask her the same question. It's an open-ended question. Only the soldiers give him a straightforward answer: Jesus of Nazareth. Mary says, "If you've taken him away, tell me where you've laid him." And our disciples this morning answer by asking him where he is staying. Only the ones who have no relationship with him, who don't want to have a relationship with him, simply speak his name. Mary wants to prepare his body for burial. And the others? If they are truly to be Jesus' disciples, the first thing to do is to be where he is, to remain with him, to abide with him. And so Jesus invites them to come and see, to remain with him. And they follow him to his abode, and they abide with him that day. Their question is not as random as it first appears, not as much a non-answer as it seems. Instead, when Jesus asks them, "What are you looking for?" their answer is, "We are looking for you. We want to remain with you." And then something really interesting happens. Andrew, one of the two disciples who believed John and followed Jesus, goes and finds his brother Simon, and he says, "We have found him." And Jesus knows Simon well enough at first meeting to know that he will be foundational to the movement Jesus is building. Jesus sees him, knows him, and names him. This isn't unique to Peter. Jesus sees and knows us, and Jesus has named us through the waters of our baptism. And every time we are invited to the table, Jesus invites us to come and see. To see that Jesus abides with us, inviting us into ever deeper relationship, into discipleship. And it's up to us to decide if we are going to be like Andrew and Philip, who go and find their friends and siblings and invite them to come and see, or if we're going to be like the unnamed disciple who accompanies Andrew from John to Jesus, but who does not seek out anyone to invite. Because the ones who come, who see and believe, don't keep it to themselves. They go and they find others. But they don't do it for the sake of doing it. They do it because they are just so excited. They can't keep it to themselves. They have to share this new movement that they are a part of. They have to tell someone about this Messiah they have found. But not everyone is so naive as to believe right away. It's normal, even natural, for us to have questions when we're being called deeper into discipleship, even when we know the one who's calling us is Jesus. We might wonder what we're looking for, who we're looking for, whether Jesus is really inviting us to come and see, to abide with him in new ways, or just in the same old ways we always have been. But for people who don't know Jesus, these questions can be monumental. Can anything good come out of Nazareth, they might wonder, along with Nathanael? After all, according to societal expectations, the one about whom the prophets wrote was supposed to be of high social status, maybe even royal. And that didn't describe anyone from Nazareth. People were supposed to act like where they came from in terms of birth status and social class. That hasn't necessarily changed all that much, unless they manage to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. A literal impossibility, by the way. Have you ever tried it? There's kind of this social expectation that people will stay pretty much where they are. And it doesn't help us spread the word about Jesus when the wider church has the reputation of being invested in keeping poor people poor and rich people rich, in maintaining the status quo, in reinforcing stereotypes and social boundaries like race and class and gender. And that's easy for the wider church to do when it whitewashes Jesus, either by turning him into a man with a light complexion and blue eyes, or by somehow managing to rob him of his humanity entirely, making him entirely divine, so that the story about being born to a poor woman from Nazareth and adopted by a carpenter, traveling around the country to preach and teach and lead a countercultural movement, being arrested, tried, and convicted for treason and sentenced to death, is just that, a story. Jesus becomes no longer human at all. But one of the great things about the Gospel of John is that just when we might find ourselves tempted by such a heresy, the writer reminds us of Jesus' dual nature, fully human and fully divine. And John does that very neatly in this text. In verse 49, Nathanael says to Jesus, "You're God's own, the Son of God." And in the language of the day, to be the son of anything was to have those qualities. So to be the Son of God was to be divine, every bit as divine as God. But just 2 verses later, Jesus says, "I'll swear any oath you like in a court of law, the angels of God will ascend and descend on the chosen one, on the Son of Man," which means, by definition, Jesus is every bit as human as Joseph. We can't separate Jesus' divinity and humanity any more than we can separate Jesus' call to come and see from the work of discipleship, telling people and showing people what Jesus is all about. And that means not being invested in the status quo. Because Jesus turns all that on its head. The last are first, and the weak are strong, and the hungry are fed. But that happens best when we know what we stand for. When we can see that Jesus is inviting all of us, the wider church, to come and see a new way of being disciples, a way that puts abiding relationships at the center, that puts caring for those who need it most at the center. And that is worth coming and seeing and staying around for.